Good afternoon, Rotary Club of Flint. Wonderful to see you all here today. We have a nice full room with lots of Rotarians. I see several guests. Thank you for being here. Today is Friday, May 5th, also known as Cinco de Mayo. Yes, indeed. All right, Cinco de Mayo. So most folks tend to think that Cinco de Mayo is Mexican Independence Day. It's not. That's actually September 16th. But what a lot of folks don't know is that it commemorates the Battle of Puebla, when the Mexicans were able to rout the French. Yes, the French, not the Spanish, the French, that Napoleon III had tried to take over Mexico. And so the Mexicans were able to beat them back on Cinco de Mayo. Of course, they lost the war, but just wait a few years. At the end of the US Civil War, then the US pitched in to take out the French, and that's partly why they don't speak French there now. All right, so today we will be welcoming the Sheriff, Chris Swanson, who will be joining us in a little while. But before that, we're going to get started with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And as Rotarians, we try to live by the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. Is it true? Is it fair? Will it be able to develop better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all? And today, for our inspirational message, we welcome David Smith.
Good afternoon, everyone. As many of you know, yesterday was National Day of Prayer, and I was invited to speak to an interfaith group at Nissan, in spite of my somewhat ragged history with prayer. And I wanted to share just a slice of that with you today, because I have a sense that it might be applicable in any of our days. So, alongside with traditional prayer, where we may be asking for intercession or giving thanks or praise, it's my feeling that there is a place for prayer everywhere, where it actually exists, that we're wandering through it on an ongoing basis. And I'll explain. There are some philosophers, some cosmologists, and one really mediocre movie that has suggested that the purpose of the universe is to be noticed. That from the first blossom of stars to the blossoms that are in my yard this morning, they all unfold from the beginning of time till now to be noticed. All of that is to be made, we are to be aware of it. We were invited to be witnesses to the unfolding of creation, to notice it. The poet Mary Oliver told me and every other writer that my purpose is to pay attention, to be amazed, and to tell about it, which has served me well, I think, as a writer, but it also is a prayer. I got this email from someone in response to something I wrote, and the story she tells was about how she lives in an apartment building, and sometimes in the lobby of the apartment building, there's clutter, the usual things that can accumulate, like paper cups and little bits of garbage and dust and whatever, plants that need to have the leaves snipped off them, and she does these things. And in the laundry room, she collects the old cartons of soap boxes, and she replaces the battery in the smoke detector and the burned out light bulb. And it's not because there isn't a super to do all that. It's because she says, this is how I pray for the people in my building. Now, the important part, that's a lovely thought, but the act is separate from my message. And this is what she wrote. She said it like this. This makes me wonder if prayer isn't simply the pursuit of what is possible, whether it be the meeting of needs or healing or opportunity or friendship or love. She says to me, and I'm sharing this with you, that the looking is the prayer. It is the being aware. It is the seeking. It is the expectation that you will see. That act, that awareness is the prayer. And it is so simple to do and so simple to not do. Because we're so constructed and distracted that we think what I'll do is I'll finish this task, and then later, before I go to bed or have a meal or go to church, then I will say a prayer. And I'm telling you that the universe wants to be noticed, and it's our responsibility as witnesses to pay attention and to be amazed and grateful, and then tell others about it. The writer Brian Doyle said this: maybe just paying fierce attention is the most eloquent way to prayer. Interesting that they just fell into my lap when I was paying attention. Imagine this, before I go, I'll say this last thing. Imagine sitting with someone that you love from the deepest part of your soul. You're sitting with them and you decide with no other motivation to just pay attention to them, to devote your attention, to notice them. That is a prayer between you and that person. And in the same way, when you leave here, it can be a prayer between you and what God has created. Amen.
Thank you very much, David. And on that note, please enjoy your lunch. Please feel free to deeply notice and pay attention to the people around you. They enjoy your fellowship.
I want to go. Down in the lake, you know, today, really good.
Welcome back, everybody. Please continue to enjoy your food. We're going to get started here with our program portion for today. So I first want to begin just with the opportunity to look a little bit more closely at a few of the ideas that were introduced during last week's club assembly. I know we gave you a lot of information. We went over some of it rather briefly, and then you all had sent you this past week a copy of the slides from the club assembly, along with a couple documents that would let you understand more about the specific changes that are being proposed. So I'm going to pass the microphone to President-elect Anne Marie, who is going to walk us through a couple of the items from last week's presentation in more detail, so you can have a chance to understand it and ask questions about it.
Maybe I was going to do too much. Yeah. When I saw a large turnout today, I was really pleased, and then I remembered who our speaker was, and I was also relieved because then I thought it wasn't because he came packing rotten tomatoes. So everybody, I hope, had an opportunity to open their email on Tuesday that had all the documents we promised with all the details. This is the very, very kind of 50,000 foot level at what we're proposing that would require bylaws changes. The end of the day, we have dues payments now due the last day of the month of July. That would change because we would like to offer a monthly payment plan. We will not have specific language saying that we meet every Friday. We will just have language about meetings every week, and they're going to change to reflect the fact that we're trying again to engage more members, to engage in service, and to engage more community groups outside of our traditional meeting setting. We will continue to do our regular Friday meetings on the second and fourth Fridays of the month, but again, that will not be specifically stated in the bylaws, just that we're continuing weekly meetings, but the format will be flexible. And then, again, the monthly payment option also came with, I'm not sure, surprised myself and see what's on the next. This is largely due to the fact that we'd like to propose these different membership tracks. Traditional is where we are today with the current membership format coming here, paying for meals every week, doing your charitable contributions, which we're very grateful for, and has helped build this club up over the years. A service path, which we actually started last year, and we're just tweaking a little bit. And you can see that the dues are not stated in there, under 40. I think that other clubs in and out of our district have been very successful at adding this membership category to recognize that young career people and young family, heads of families and that sort of thing are at just a different place with being able to contribute their way to a Rotary membership. And then the legacy membership, as I stated last week, really came out of the meeting we had when we reviewed all of these changes with our past presidents. And it was really their recommendation that we consider this, because we have a large number of members who are, for whatever reason, because they live a good portion of the year away from Flint, or they're not physically able to attend, or whatever life changes they've had, might still like to be very supportive of the work that we do, continue that work, help sustain this club, and continue to make it, a really vibrant part of our community. So I think before I go any further, this is a lot of where the meat is, because it changes some of the financial structure. We want, again, to be able to encourage just standard practice, that it may be a lot easier to set up a monthly payment plan for something by giving us your credit card and signing a pledge and writing one check on one date at the beginning of the year. And the financial structure of these 4 areas are all slightly different, but basically the service path is a commitment of $420 a year, $300 required, 120, which is the recommended charitable contributions. Under 40 is a 220 required payment with 120 recommended charitable contributions. And the legacy membership level is basically the same as our traditional path, which is the $440, which is a combination of your membership dues, your Flint Rotary Charitable Foundation gift, which we make every year, and then the recommended charitable contributions on top of that. So, any questions?
Yeah, so I didn't see any questions today, which may mean that we've answered and anticipated everything you might possibly want to know. Or it might mean you need some more time to digest it, or it might mean something else, and that's all okay. What our plan is that we're gonna also have an opportunity at next week to just say, okay, now that you've had a little more time to let this soak in, what questions, thoughts, concerns might you have at that time? Our intention is that at our May 19th meeting, which will be 2 weeks from today, that's when we're hoping to put this bylaws change to a vote and get the official blessing of the club. So over the next week, 2 weeks, if you do have questions, if you have concerns or thoughts, please feel free to reach out to me, to Anne Marie, to any of the other board members, so that we can make sure that you've got the information that you need in order to feel like you're able to make the most informed choice. And if you've got a concern, we would like to know that too. You'll notice haven't officially proposed a budget for you, but we also are going to be proposing the official budget at that time. If you'll recall, during the club assembly last week, what we shared was like the initial projected budget for next year. And that included a pretty significant potential deficit. So we're going to be meeting as a board over the next 2 weeks to be finalizing a proposed budget. But obviously, there's two ways to address a potential deficit. You either raise more money, which in our case would be one potential path is looking at a moderate dues increase. We haven't had an increase in several years. The other path is looking at ways to reduce expenses. And as was shared in the club assembly last week, we do know that within the next 14 months, Amy Vanderput is going to be exiting from her role as club administrator, which is the biggest expense for our club. And so that does present some opportunities to think about how to adjust to that new reality and possibly look at ways to how that might affect our budget expenses for next year as well. So those are some of the potential things that the board is going to be considering as we prepare to present you with the final budget. And I know we've got a few minutes to play with right here. And so I just didn't know if anybody had any initial thoughts or reactions that you would want to share right now.
By and large, the traditional versus service, the differential is the 10 hours or better.
Yeah, but-
Service to the community.
right. And so for the benefit of people online or who are going to watch the recording, the question was trying to understand better the distinction in terms of the service commitment. And so between the service and the traditional. So yes, so the idea is that everybody has to pay like a certain amount of baseline dues. People in the traditional path have typically given more to the Rotary International Foundation and to our local Flint Foundation. The service path would recognize that you're basically giving more of your time towards club projects. And that would then reduce significantly the amount that you would be requested to give for the Flint Rotary Charitable Foundation as well as the Rotary International Foundation.
With the service side going toward my participants on my program.
Well, so that's a great question. The question was whether service on a committee could count towards that. And that is something that we are trying to iron out some of the details. We recognize that there are certainly some people, say, Lynetta, you're definitely one that have taken on an inordinate amount of club service. It's kind of, you're in a category along with a few other people that have done, that exceptional level of service. I would say that things like helping out with fellowship once a month during your birthday month, that's just kind of the expected run of the mill service that we all chip in as we're able to. Things that go above and beyond, some of those details are going to have to be worked out with the service committee chairs. But I would say that the expectation with the service membership is that it's beyond just the ordinary baseline. It would be involvements in those weekly, or the monthly service projects that we might be doing or other kind of exceptional service. I saw Jerry, Jane, and Jim. We got all the Juds. So Jerry, Jane, and Jim.
First of all, I think this is a lot to suck in short time, and I appreciate the way you're handling. I have some questions about. I'm not going to Rotary every week. I mean, I just am trying to see how that feels, but I don't know. So you're taking this into consideration. The other thing is, there's been any thought of combining the clubs. Matter. Morning club. The other thing, to me, two things are strong. The problem that we're having. One is people do not know what service clubs do. We have funding available, and we work on that. One but Rotary does and other service clubs. People know very little about it. Anybody I talk to. The other thing is that we don't do anything to follow up on people that don't come. Why? I mean, and we haven't done, not a criticism of the club, but these are things that are primary in terms of one of our problems. know about it, and maybe the internship of new members and all of that. I was gonna write something to you and then read it. I'm gonna send some things along, but I'm on hold you for things, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I think we do not do good marketing for Rotaries. For example, in Bay City, in the club there, we put a threefold together that we could have that talked about specifically our club, what we've done locally, what we do internationally, and those kinds of things. So when somebody says, put Rotary, you got it. And the other thing is, we have a program where we are working with the schools or other organizations that we brag about what we do, so we can bring people into the organization that it's one of what's good.
Well, thank you very much, Jay. I will not attempt to recap for Zoom all of the things that you said, but I appreciate.
I'm sure they wrote it all.
I'm sure they wrote it all down, but I know Anne-Marie's over here taking notes as well. And yes, many of the things that you identified are things that we've been thinking about and trying to figure out the best way to integrate moving forward.
I'll be briefer. What, is there an expectation that there would be more service opportunities with the
Yes.
time constraints?
So the way this is proposed is that the first week of every month, rather than meeting in this room, we would have a Rotary service opportunity. So that once a month during that first week, there would be a Rotary service opportunity. So that would count towards if you're on the service path, being part of your service hours. And we might still have other things like Prim Rotary Miles. That doesn't take place on the first week. Doesn't mean we're going to stop doing it, but just to know that there's going to be a consistent first week service opportunity. Yes, Jim.
On the service issue, are these to be Rotary sanctioned service activities or for persons involved in other service activities within the community? Will those things count?
Okay, so the question was whether kind of non-Rotary sanctioned service activities count towards service hours. I think the spirit of this was the notion that instead of meeting here for a traditional program, we would as Rotarians be doing some sort of service. It doesn't necessarily mean that, all 40 or 50 of us are necessarily going to be able to participate in every single one. But the idea is that it would be a Rotary related service. Now, certainly if people have ideas about what those activities might be based on some of the other connections and relationships they have, like you brought forward the edible Flint service opportunity, that those would be things that could certainly be woven in potentially to that.
And a follow-up comment, I think it's a good idea, like liking the proposed change in the structure of the support for the future growth.
Yes.
I compliment you and your committee for the work you've done. Anytime you implement new policies, you never know how they're going to work out. Is there a way that we can measure the effectiveness of this reform and maybe take a look at it in 1 year, 2 years, something like that, or is it already built in?
So I think that's a great point in terms of what does the effectiveness look like. I can see overall, if we end up getting, more Rotarians and more participation, those are two real quick indicators of are we on the right path. We have seen our membership decline steeply over the last few years, and we're not alone in that. A lot of Rotary clubs and service clubs in general have done that. We're hopefully, bottoming out and positioning ourselves to stabilize for potentially growth. But that's, I think, one of the big indicators. If we're seeing our club demographics start to more closely mirror that of our community, then that's, I think, another sign that we're on the right path. And those are the sorts of things that are really anchoring our strategic plan, and that are, whether it's the structure of our meetings or the structure of our dues or all these other things. Those are some of the key things that are really anchored in those pillars of Rotarian engagement and diversity and inclusion that we're at the foundation of our strategic plan. Yes, Kyle.
So feedback actually on Jerry's comments, as we have talked to members who have either left the club or we don't see as often, one of the things we have heard is the weekly Friday cadence just doesn't necessarily work for the more modern hybrid office environment. Members either don't have an hour and a half lunch, which we've got for the dry time, maybe 2 hour lunch. Or oftentimes they are at home on Fridays, it's for one day maybe that they're not in the office. And so they have to, get dressed up and come out to the club, might not be how they want to spend their Fridays, particularly as the weather gets nice. And then also the benefit of, as Jerry said, the marketing, as we are doing events in community, that's marketing really. We had a deeper prospect see us because we were at marketing. It's someone that many of us know for sure, but Emily saw us. But her seeing us outside of our traditional environment opened up a really new world of new experience. It all goes there.
Thank you for that, Todd. If you have additional comments or questions, please know that we are going to have another opportunity next week to touch base on this, as well as you're welcome to send an email. I see that our guest speaker is here, so I'm just going to briefly go through the next couple of things. Ellen Eccles has agreed to be our point of contact. If there's anybody who would like to join the Rotary table for the Flint Public Library fundraising breakfast, that's going to be on June 5th. The program starts at 8:30. The buffet line starts at 7:45. So if you have an interest, please let Ellen know within the next week or so that she can mark you down. And I also want to share last call. So we have, and I say we, it's really Jean and Victor and Mike, have been going through the archives at staff, and this is an item that is looking for a new home. It's a large pull-out kind of cabinet. It could be used to display various things. It is solidly built and welded, but it's going to need to find a new home. And yes, Mary.
Ian already talked to me about that a couple weeks ago, and I'm on the board at Flushing Senior Center.
Yeah.
We want it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marie, and we'll connect with David and make arrangements for the pickup. Thank you. And that brings us to our raffle. So go ahead and get out your ticket.
We gotta hurry up.
The fast raffle. That's right.
Is there even lights over there? Not gonna be on the witness.
We'll get your ticket. It's all-
So one of the ways that we're measuring if some of this is working is we're getting big ticket items. For the 50-50, more than just that cash you put in. So for third place. Come on, Rob, come on. I'm sorry.
715190.
David Smith, you have won a. Someone else owns it.
Next up, we've got.
You'll switch her in there, George.
All right, 715128.
Kyle, check my tickets.
128.
I won second place last time I did this.
And 7116. 116. Perfect.
You're running around. All right, good.
Thank you. Okay, so very briefly before we go to our guest speaker, I just want to acknowledge all of our guests here today. We've got Sonia Glass from the district governor-elect who is here with us. So welcome to you, Sonia. And if you are a guest here today, would you mind just standing? I think we've got several in the room. All right. Terrific, terrific. Very glad to have you here today and look forward to having you back. With that, I'm going to pass the mic to our own Duncan Beagle.
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. I know everybody wants to get out of here and enjoy the spring weather, right? By the way, before I introduce Chris, we're gonna have kind of a fun program next week. It's gonna be the Coney Island culture. It's gonna be about the history of Coney Island and the significant role they played in the growth and development of Flint, Genesee County. So if you got a chance, it'll be a fun program. All right, I think all of you know the sheriff of Genesee County right now. It probably seems like he's been our sheriff for 10 or 15 years, but actually he assumed the position of sheriff in January of 2020 and was elected to a 4-year term this past in November. I just jotted some crazy things down because I want to get him up here. Not taking a long time introducing him, but there were some things I felt I had to tell you about Chris. He's a 3-time author, although somebody told me 4.
4's in the works, but 3 times.
4 is in the works. He, and that was, I think one of your books was about your childhood memories growing up. And I think you can tell him later about what your other books were. During his career, he was working corrections, narcotics, criminal investigation, death investigation, and the undersheriff. He's also a motivational speaker. He works occasionally as a college instructor, and he's a 4-time Ironman minister. I'll let him explain all of that. What that. Many of you may remember you've seen Chris on TV. In 2018, before he became the sheriff, he actually founded the Genesee Human Russian Strike Team, or commonly referred as GHOST. And I'll let him share a little background on that. Many of you may also remember, right in the early stages of COVID, on May 30th of 2020, during the George Floyd protests around the country, our sheriff received national attention when he removed his riot gear and marched with the protesters as they went down, I think, Miller Road. Got a lot of publicity at the time. Also, when taking office, he also ignited the Ignite program. Some of you probably heard a little bit about it. I'll let Chris expand on it. During 2021, he was featured in USA Today for his opinion piece on criminal justice reform and Ignite. Finally, some of you may know, but every time around the holidays, you will find Sheriff Swanson out delivering meals to the poorest of poor people in our community. And a source told me today that began when he was a father and he had his own children, and he and his wife went out and did that. So that's nothing new to him. He's an alumnus of the University of Michigan, where he received his bachelor's and master's degree. Now, let me say this, I've been in public life for a long time. And Chris didn't write this down and tell me what to say. In all years I've served, I have never met anybody with the passion and enthusiasm that this guy has for his job. The last time he was here, I called him, I said, hey, what do you think of the shirt? And he said, that guy wore me out. Now, if Chris was given an hour, he could talk easily on that and he would keep the spell off. But I'm gonna shut up and bring him up here and let him take advantage of his time. Let's have a nice welcome to our ticket.
It only took me 20 minutes and you took 4 minutes. So I only have 16. But I do want to say my friend Hassan's friend that's here from Dearborn Heights, he won the 2nd place. But as I can tell you about his heart, and just I know this, he's like, I'm not taking this money. So we're gonna donate it to that one who's working the front desk that tells you it's over here, so that's where we donate it to. Okay, there you go. She won today, so I just want to say that I appreciate all the accolades. There's nobody in this room that's here by accident. Everybody here has the same heart I do. I just have a different platform. And I say that because we have the position of influence in the ability to touch lives, but there's also something else that is many times forgotten by public officials, certainly elected officials, is that we have a duty to touch the lives and impact people. We have a duty. And I can tell you, my dad and my grandpa were both Detroit police officers. I grew up in law enforcement. My grandpa was in the 1945 riots in Detroit, and my father was in the 1967 riots. And of course, what we experienced here in 2020 was an example of how fast things get triggered with people that look like me in a uniform like I look like, can literally in public view take the life of another human being. And when you see how fast things can tip on the wrong side, I'm a 100% believer, evidence-based, that can tip the other side as well. So when people see, and I talk and ask questions, how do you stay so positive? How do you stay so energetic? Because I choose to respond even in death and violence in a way that's going to be, number one, hopeful, and number two, not let that situation go in vain. And I said to people, when George Floyd was murdered, I said, I will not let that death be a death in vain. And to your point, Judge, because of what we were able to do with Flint, that moment that happened on May 30th reached 3.2 billion people in one day. And I say that because we have a duty to do the right thing, not the popular thing, the right thing. When you look at public servants like you, and I just get a few minutes to share my life, that's what keeps me going. And on my 31st year, June 2nd, next month, I had the same commitment and tenacity as I had when I first started in June 2nd, 1993. Because I know that we only have a moment of time for us to really do what we are called to do. And imagine if you had that moment and you look back one day, never have it again, and you didn't take action. I would be mortified. It'd be like getting a 911 call and then purposely not responding to a call for service. I became a paramedic before I was a police officer. I became a licensed medic when I was 20 years old. I'm still a licensed medic. I kept my license. And I remember looking at people that had all the money, all the influence in serious medical conditions, and they would have such innocence in their eyes, in such fear, whether it was a stroke, a heart attack, whether they were just coming out of a seizure, or whether it was their loved one they're watching in the jump seat of a rig. And I would always think back, right now, nothing in your life matters except for this person. Imagine if I didn't do my job to take care of your loved one or yourself. So the first lesson I teach fellow Rotarians is always prepare in peace to perform in chaos. And if you look at the water cup on your table and you fill it up to the top, that's our life, our vessel. And we pour in things and we let other people pour in their lives. But every once in a while, that cup is going to be bumped. And you don't know when it's going to happen. You don't know how it's going to happen. You don't know how big it's going to happen. But what spills out is what you and I have been putting into when people are watching and when they're not. I get to come here because I get energized by fellow like-minded co-laborers in the field of service. And I want you to know that every day you get up, whether you've been in the business or you're retired, it doesn't matter, you're still like-minded. You may not be a circuit court judge, but you still have that desire to serve people. You get up every single day, you've got arrows in the front from people that want to attack you, and arrows in the back from the people that you thought supported you. And yet you keep doing it. You need to keep doing it. If you're here in the sound of my voice, it doesn't matter what's happening in your life, successfully or not, there's a mission that you and I have to keep on going. That's why I have so many guys. That's why I look at everything optimistic. That's why I have so much hope, because if not us, then who? There are so many people who wake up every day and they don't have hope. They don't have what we have in this country. I had the privilege today of meeting a fascinating individual. And her name is Mother Maggie. And she is the Mother Teresa in Egypt. I drove to Grand Rapids today. Pastor and I loaded up at 5:45 this morning, and I wanted to meet her. And Egypt has such a population, like many countries do, of people that are forgotten. And she has dedicated her life to serve these individuals that have nothing. And when you meet her and you listen to her, it energizes me. Although she doesn't have the same energy, she has a different energy. She has a different influence. And she told the story of a flower that's sitting on the podium. And she said, this flower doesn't have to say a word for you to know what this flower was for. And that's what our life is. And it's stuck with me because I'm thinking, everybody probably knows in your world where you live, what you do, and who you are. But it's your actions that really tell the story. Your actions in the calm and your actions in the chaos. The things that you do when someone's looking at things that you do when someone's not looking. So I challenge you, if for some reason we have lost focus of that. But I also want to validate you if you wake up and wonder, why am I doing this? You're doing this because that's what you're called to do. A racehorse is forced to race. And that's where you are right now. Now I'm going to tell you that the life at the sheriff's office has been fascinating. I actually started in 1991 as an intern from Community College. And I got hired in the Marine Division shortly thereafter, and Dr. Avon Birch planted a seed, and that's what led me to, go to Michigan, and then Dr. Elstrom led me to go for my master's, and Dr. Seelig hired me as a faculty in 1997, so I've been a faculty at Michigan since 97. And all those moments in my life prepared me for that one moment, I believe it in all my heart, on May 30th. And so that was a very pivotal moment. I made a promise on that light bulb in the middle of Target. And thousands of people, unbeknownst to me, millions and millions watching by the second. I said, I can't be the total change. I'm going to do something, even though I can't do everything. But what I'm not going to do is nothing. And so we made a commitment, a pledge on that day. And that's why this community can be seen and heard around the world. That's why we launched Ignite. That's why we educate people in the jail. Now, I agree, there's people in the jail. We just did a story, 4 people that raped 4 kids since 2018, all the way to current. One's federally charged, 3 of them were state charged. They groomed them. They used gummy bears with THC to knock them out. They videotaped, recorded the sexual assault. They monetized it. I mean, who is secret? That's the protection side of this. I'll bear the sword, slay the dragon. But the service side of it is where you take care of people and you deliver food and you deliver refrigerators and deliver to the people. And Geronimo's been there, and Clerk Cummins has been there, and a lot of people in this room have supported it. That unity side of it, bringing people there, that was a missing part of law enforcement, especially from white police commanders. And that's why the Ignite, our education model, was so important. So on September 8, 2020, we launched it. Coach Harbaugh, a dear friend of mine, was there. Chief Justice Virginia McCormick was there. And we said, we are changing the culture of the jail. Since 1836, we've been doing the same thing, and it's the same generation that are coming to the jail. And I said, we're going to go to school 5 days a week, 2 hours a day. We're going to monetize it with rewards, responsibility, because that's what jail currency is. The more you do in jail, the more you get. More time out, another phone call, extra t-shirt. That's how it works in the jail. And so if we can build it on that meritocracy, because a lot of these folks have never, ever, ever been told, great job. They've never been told, hey, you did this, so this is what you get. They have not been taught that experience, and we've been able to teach that. Now I'll tell you this, his results are stunning. Within 90 days, we increased our math and reading a grade and a half. Since 2020, September 8, 2020, we dropped violence in the jail every year, 97% since the year before. We have done 230,000 contact hours of teaching. And since I've been sheriff, not a single use of force lawsuit in the Tennessee County Jail. And I say that because we changed the culture, but that's not the best part. I just came back from Dallas, Texas, launching Ignite in our 7th state. I fly in 2 weeks to Boston, Massachusetts, to Middlesex County to launch Ignite with Sheriff Tuesday. This is now the national standard across America for jails to have education in the prison. You can brag that. I don't want you to take all the credit because none of this happens with every one person. But when you look at the lives transformed, right after our Christmas spectacular, which it's always the first Saturday of December, we do an inmate toy giveaway where the inmates on the floor, male and female, they made that decision, but their kids should not pay that price. We have them write cards and Christmas messages, and then we go buy gifts for the kids. And then the kids and the parents who are outside come and we connect the card with the gift and they leave a message. And now there's that family connection. I say that because I can't do this service by myself. We get donations by the tens of thousands of dollars. I have to United Way involved because I need them to be the fiduciary to keep it. Because people are watching what we're doing in Genesee County. They're watching us because we have to do that. And our actions speak for it. I just get to be the sheriff and watch it on front row seat. Now you talk about ghosts, it's phenomenal. Ghosts I've seen because of my international experience in 2017. You talk about serving. Actually, I'll expand that. I've been taking mission trips all over the world with my voice since 2013. And I've been to Haiti more than any other country in the world 7 times. And the last time I was in Haiti, it was for a human trafficking operation in 2018. We were playing a role where we tried to work with the federal police, and ultimately it's an undercover operation. The kids were brought to our location, and we are all taken into custody. The kids are rescued, the predators and the traffickers are rescued, and then we're released back to America. And this organization I was working with uses undercover experienced officers, Delta Force, CFT members, and that's the undercovers that are in the scene. So I'm playing a role of a corporate boss at a big party, and it was on that second day of operation, I'm staying on the second floor of the hotel, and I talk about purpose, and I just say, hey, listen, my purpose is the people behind me, those four bricks. And it was at that moment I flew back, I told my predecessor, Sheriff McKell, I said, we need to do something huge about it. And since May of 2018, Ghost has been all over the country. In fact, we have been able to work with other sheriffs across the state of Michigan to develop their teams and to also work with Ghost operations with them. We've been able to go across the country to show that predators have no boundaries. And I will tell you this, we next week will go into our 49th county in the state of Michigan doing operations. We've been in 7 states. In the 3rd week of June, the National Sheriff Association, we're launching Ignite, is launching Ghost nationwide. That doesn't happen. Unless you understand and I understand our duty to act. Now I'm going to open up with some questions in a minute because I can go on, but I want to kind of set a scene here that you may have thought this is another meeting that I could think of 10,000 other things I could do. But I'm hoping that today that you're here for a call to action reminder. And I will tell you a story as to why that's so important. Because sometimes we forget the recipient of good works. And I see last names around here. I see companies that have done so much. Sometimes it's so high up here that we forget the receiving end of your goodwill in your heart. Sometimes I forget that the single parent out there, the addicted mom who has a son that's been begging for her to get the help, or vice versa. The mother who never gives up hope because her son or daughter. I'm going to tell you this behind the scenes. And I told you, May 30th is coming up, a 3-year anniversary. And I'm going to encourage you to pay attention to what's coming up on the 3rd year, because every year I have been true to my word according to some massive. So we're launching this May 30th, the Nation Outside Housing Guarantee, where inmates coming out of prison now are not given homes because of distrust of what they've done and the crime they've given. And I understand that. But when you have somebody that has no place to stay, it's a great opportunity for them to go right back in. We wonder why as a society we have recidivism, the repeat of crime. Why is it generational incarceration, generational poverty? So Ignite has helped do this. We have welding in the jail now. We have all sorts of things, right? But when they go to prison, it's 10% of the population does. We are going to bring them out. And Nation Outside, which actually represents all the returning citizens in the state, and there's 80 million returning citizens in America. 80 million people. I don't want to raise your hand, but I think that in this room, some of this room has at least done 1 day incarcerated. I can guarantee it. When you have 80 million people who've done at least 1 day incarcerated, you know what that feeling of losing your freedom is. Well, I understand bad decisions, and I understand bad luck. There's a lot of folks that made bad decisions, and there's a lot of people just born into bad situations. So that housing guarantee, when they come out of prison, Nation Outside is going to vet them, make sure they caught no more tickets in prison, they got no more cases. And they're going to go to the landlords to say, we're going to guarantee them that their rent will be paid for the entire year. And we're going to make sure up to $25,000 that their place will be taken care of. And we're not going to pay the rent. We're just going to bond the rent. And because of your acceptance, we're going to put the first $1,500 down on the security deposit and watch what happens. Because these people come out of prison, they're going to have a nice, safe place. They're going to be able to get their credit back. They're going to be able to get them home, and we're launching it right here May 30th this year. It's the national side on housing guarantee. You're all going to go to a house, and I bet you half this room has 2 houses. But sometimes you forget what's happening on the bottom. And the reason it's such a big deal to me is because on that day, Judge, on May 30th, there was no plan to do anything other than violence on both sides. There was no plan. We had riot gear. We had OC spray, we had less than lethal shotguns that were ready to deploy rubber pellets in the crowds. We had helmets, we had force. I remember when they put the 911 call out because they were marching to the Flint Township Police Department and we were outnumbered 50-1. The radio traffic was screaming, fortify the line, fortify the line. They can't get to the police department. she saw this big divide happen. And it was literally within centimeters of people yelling inside his face. It was gonna take one tipping of the scale on either side, but we didn't do that. Usually those closest to the problem have a solution. It was just a moment that 3 seconds changed everything. And as the crowd was asked what we needed to do, and they chanted back, "Walk with us," they called us up. They called us up. And then the response was, "Well, let's walk, because that's a lot better than bloodshed. It's a lot better than loss of life." And when we turned and walked, this is the moment, and when people wonder, as I go in my career and I go to different places of influence, because I'm just getting started. I'm not worried about just getting started. I'm gonna remember this moment because I turned to Ryan Dobbs, who's one of my tactical guys. He's been 6 years in the Marine Corps, deployed multiple times. He's a recon instructor. I said, "Is the police department sick?" He goes, "It's good." And it's the next question I asked, which is the reason why I'm so passionate. I said, "Where are the people?" He said, "They're all following you." I say dead babies. I brought people back from the dead who dropped in a foyer. I put my hands in bloody chest of shooting victims, and I've done CPR on moms, and I mean, I've done all that. No other time in my life have I felt so convicted than at that moment. So my call to action to you is, when you look around, are they following you? Are they following you? And if they are, you gotta do that. Thank you very much.
Their responses. I don't know if anybody here has questions for you.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Who did the teaching in the jail?
So we have 200 online. She must be a teacher. Am I right? Wow. You just said, "Sure." I just had PTSD because I was not a good student. Those man, I just want you to know, for all the teachers out there, the students that can't sit still, talk too much, and don't do math, they too do work for the government. Oh, that's me, yeah. That's it. That's Mr. Roy Stacy. So the question is, who teaches? We have over 200 online courses. We use Chromebooks to do the online teaching. And we also have instructors that come from all over to teach inside the jail. So Elder Credit Union does all of our financial literacy. Dr. Shane Jackson teaches all of our healthy eating habits. We actually cook food in the jail. That's different than hot fries and Mountain Dew. They can actually buy the food ingredients from commissary, learn how to cook. They learn how to make smoothies. We've got my community college that does all of our welding. We've got 3 virtual reality stations, 3rd floor, 5th floor. They have over 51 life skills that they're teaching. They can build door frames, they can plumb, they can change drains underneath. But on top of that, this is what I love the most is we've got volunteers that come in, our Mount Moore school through the school system that does the GEDs and diplomas. I just think the deal last December with Brown University, Michigan, and Harvard, they track all of our data. And just today, Ashton was here to witness it. I talked to Mark Howard, who's a PhD out of Georgetown. And I fly to DC in July to link up the Georgetown University with Genesee County Sheriff's Office because they want to join Harvard to track our data because it's changing culture. Man. So. Once people are out. Yes. The question is, when they get out, what is the recurrence rate? And that's a 3 to 5 year study, which is why Harvard led the charge to say, Dr. Elstrom, we know that this is a fix, but we need to track to make sure if Chris wants to get out of jail in January, he doesn't come back in June. Does that really determine a long, a long game win? And so we need to make sure Chris doesn't come back the next year, the next 3 years, the next 5 years. The wraparound service, Senator Jim Ananick, who now is the Flint Health Coalition CEO and president, they have an organization that they created called RISE. And so there's aftercare once they leave the jail. All those data points are tracked to answer that question, but it's going to take some time. What I can tell you, there's an immediate fix, grades are up. We have done 19 commencement graduations where we reunite and give people graduate certificates, caps and gowns, certificates of appreciation. But ultimately, it's gonna show a massive reduction of recidivism. I'm just gonna be bold and not conservative, but I also won't be obscene about it. I can guarantee that education, post incarceration will drop crime 40%. And I'm backed by the USA Today study, it's a random study in 2016, when you look at how many people commit crimes that have no education, GEDs, high school diplomas, 2-year degrees, 4-year degrees, masters, people who have PhDs do not commit crimes as much as those who have no education. So the higher we move that needle, we're gonna drop it. Case in point, side note, Michigan spends $2.2 billion to fund the Michigan Department of Corrections. 32 prisons, not jails, prisons. Imagine if we were able to reduce that by 40%. Where could that money go? $985 million. The answer is 40% is my target, and we're getting there, but the data will show it within about 18 to 24 months. Yes, sir.
Kind of going into that, and I was wondering before you started talking to the principal here.
Yeah.
In plenty, because we have all of these programs, but it sounds like kind of answer the question, the answer that all these programs get funded by outside entities, so it's not all necessarily coming out of the pocketbook.
Yeah, let me just tell you this. We started for the first 2.5 years, zero funding. Because I told the board of commissioners were at that point, Chairman Clemens, I said, I just want you to see our results. Then I'll ask you for money. And so we've been able to get funding for Ignite positions 2.5 years later, but not from the county. Commissioners, they see the reaction, and so does Washington. So our Congressman Dan Kildee came in 2 years ago, went to the floors, went to graduation. He had 10 submissions for the 22-23 budgets for the White House to approve. He got over 100. Ignite was #1. We got our first federal funding that opened up in October of last year. We're able to find 2 deputies and also 2 returning citizens, John L. Allen Bay and Percy Glover, both of which did time in prison. Percy did 12 years for second-degree murder. John L. did 29 years for murder, and they're full-time employees at the sheriff's office. That's history. They're called county ambassadors. They're also co-founders and executive officers for community engagement. Yes, ma'am.
We all know that there's a tremendous labor shortage. And you talk about these programs and the housing afterwards. Are you helping these people get jobs, especially in the building trades?
Absolutely. Building trades, retail, hotel, hospitality. We work directly with the Department of Labor. I had a meeting with them on Monday. We are in partnership. It's our 3rd time done. It's called the MC3 training. And it's a pre-apprentice school that's 40 hours a week, 6 weeks. In last May, we graduated our first 6th class, people in 6th class. They have tethers on. They never missed an hour. They were there for 6 weeks. When they graduated at Michigan Works, where we held the ceremony, all 6 of them went into full-time, and they're still full-time now. But hey, yeah, that's where your work stories. Yeah, last night was not a lot. I hope they're going to 10 o'clock, boil loaf, and we jumped it. Not very much, but I hope they stay married after this year. My wife, I met her in jail 29 years ago. That's a whole other story. So worked with Chris Flores. So Chris and Reggie Coleman, anybody know Chris Flores and Reggie? Oh, yeah, that's why I know they hooked up Jamie and I. So you can find good women in jail for the fellas.
At the Humane Society fundraiser.
Oh, yeah.
You said something that really came home. You said people that abuse animals abuse people.
Oh,
And boy, did that hit home. But also you spoke about your state level, your.
yes, ma'am.
You told
Speak to me.
the thing about the law that you can't abuse animals.
So I'm gonna do a straw poll here. I know I want my mic to get cut off. But I'm gonna tell you this, what I'm talking about is Chris Swanson, who happens to be the sheriff in Michigan, not Sheriff Chris Swanson. For years, judges have seen it. You've seen the stories. People abuse, torture, starve animals, companion animals that can't testify, they can't defend themselves. Abuse equals abuse. Stats show it. Stories are terrifying. Uvalde, Parkland, Oxford, all 3 of those shooters, all tortured animals before they killed people. 70% of all domestic violence involve a threat against a companion animal in the house. Of those threats, 90% of them carry through with a physical assault. When you look at somebody that's gonna starve or beat an animal to death, it's just a matter of time when they progress to people. Easter of 2022, I saw a case where our officer called on that day. Guy and girl go to breakfast, he doesn't like what he got for breakfast, they go to the house, they go to an argument. He pulls out a gun, rapes her at gunpoint, gets off her, she jumps out the window with her dog to escape. He chases her down on Facebook Live, she's on to document everything. He goes up and shoots and kills the dog live, drags her back, continues the assault. That started something in my mind because we kept seeing these cases. We had another case just shortly thereafter, a guy goes over trying to get into a neighbor's dispute. She's not there, he stabs her dog 22 times with a screwdriver. These people do not have a right to own a dog, a cat, a gerbil, a mouse. I put a team together 11 and a half months ago from across the country. And I said, we're gonna do a ballot initiative in Michigan. The legislative process has its place. But if you've ever dealt with the legislative process or the legislature, they'll tell you what you sponsor in the beginning is not what comes out at the back end. Sometimes it takes years to do it. Makes sense to Chris? Let the people decide. Do we want to create a registry where if you're a convicted animal abuser, torturer, you starve an animal to death, misdemeanor, felony, multiple offenders, or habitual, that you have given up your right to own an animal? I say yes. The second part of that is, in our world, when we go and rescue animals after others have been killed, the state of Michigan law considers animals to be property like the chair you're in or the car you drove here. Not living property, property. So the second part of that ballot initiative is going to define them as living property. And when we take those animals within 22 days of the first hearing, those animals are rehomed and not stuck in cages at Animal Control and Humane Society, which is chronic problem across the state. Even now in Animal Control in Genesee County, we just released 2 dogs that we had in custody for over 800 days in a cage. That's the ballot initiative. There's 2 ways to get on the ballot: signatures, which is extremely costly and laborious. You need 750,000 signatures. But we have a better way, and that is I have met with the lobbyist firm and was just with Lee Briggs last night. We're going to put it to the legislature to vote for them to put it on the ballot and let the people decide. It's got an 87% chance of passing in November 2024, and it's probably the only beautifying thing we're going to agree on in 2024. That's what we're talking about.
And thank you for everybody who stepped in today. David, for your inspirational message. Marie, for giving a new home to our cabinets. Lauren, for the notes today. Bob, you set up a takedown. And we had 2 people that stepped in for roles today. So Rob is our pseudo Amy while she's on vacation. And then also Jerry Noodle for stepping in as well. And then of course, assisting with the raffle, Nick and Rob. Next Friday, come back. If you like Flint counties or you like Flint history or you like them together, then you are in luck because we're going to be hearing from Gary Fisher from the Genesee County Historical Society, focusing on Flint county history. And with that, thank you all so much. Look forward to seeing you next week. We're adjourned.